Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
And we are the FAIRtax Guys, complete with, as usual, Fat Albert and our scrolling banner. And if you're listening on a podcast or the radio station, you'll have to go to our YouTube channel or our Rumble archive and see what we're talking about here.
To see us in action, with the and the scrolling banner, well, both I think would be wonderful to take to a town hall meeting or meeting with even if you had a one-on-one meeting with your representative, you could take a Fat Albert composite or a picture and say, this is our tax code. And this is how complicated it is. And the other side of it, of course, is a scrolling banner at town hall, or you can get into the visual is quite remarkable and see simple, efficient, visible.
There you go.
Means it in three very specific words what the FAIRtax does and how it works.
Yes, absolutely. And let's put in a plug real quick. If you missed last week's FAIRtax Power Radio episode, we had Steve Hayes on. And of course, he is always interesting to talk to. And so we discussed a couple of pretty cool topics: the makeup and the thought processes that rule the elite 1%, and also talked a bit about the guy who wanted to have the IRS tax return leaker, the guy who leaked Donald Trump's tax returns with others. They want to have him pardoned. So that's going to be a good show. So go back in the archive and check that one out if you haven't done it. Let us go ahead and since we had Steve with us last week, we were not able to dig into what the Congress critters are doing to the tax code like we usually do here on FAIRtax Power Radio. And I was somewhat surprised. A couple of weeks ago when we looked at this, there was a whole glut of new, things that had been introduced into Congress dealing with the tax code. Not so much this week, but we do have a couple of good ones here. So let me start with H.R. 7870, H.R. 7870, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide that certain PIT shall not be subject to income or employment taxes for a period of 5 years. People who work in an industry where they receive tips, you think restaurant servers at the top of that list, but they have to report those tips. The restaurant obviously doesn't know how much the servers make in tips. They can kind of estimate it. But now this bill says we want to provide that certain tips shall not be subject to income or employment taxes for a period of 5 years. That's it.
It's picking and choosing winners and losers, advantages, disadvantages. How come they don't have a tax break for volunteers that propose alternative sources of raising revenue for the federal government? Have they not thought about that for putting in the tax code?
Oh, that would be something. But anyway, again, certain tips. There's no text in this, so I can't tell which tips would qualify not to be counted as income and which ones wouldn't. But the fair tax doesn't do that. The fair tax doesn't care how much you make, how you make it, whatever. You just pay the tax when you buy something. End of story. Game over. We don't need this kind of garbage with a fair tax. Okay, let's move on. HR 7852, 7852, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to allow employers a credit. There's our famous tax credit again. Allow employers a credit against income tax for employees who participate in qualified apprenticeship programs. So, I tell you what, you remember a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about asking artificial intelligence how many tax credits there are in the Internal Revenue Code? I never could get an answer, but John Gaver did. He asked something called Gab.ai, that question, and he says that that artificial intelligence program said that there are approximately 240, it said, tax credits and deductions. So he kind of looped those two together into one group. So I don't know how many of those 240 are tax credits and how many of them are deductions. But that says 240. That number still sounds a bit low. But that's what John was able to find for us. We appreciate the effort there, Gaver.
Get the book. The Tax Deception.
Yes, I'm not sure he answers that question specifically, but yeah, that is definitely a book that folks should get a hold of and order extra copies and send them to your congressional representatives, send them to your friends and what have you. But the tax deception definitely well worth the investment. Let's go ahead. HR 7780 is the next one on the list. This is to amend the Internal Revenue Code to prohibit certain retirement plans for making investment decisions on the basis of factors other than financial risk and return factors. In other words, they're trying to get rid of this, DEI, socially conscious investing, when other factors trump the financial, factors in the thing. If you're deciding your basics on anything other than financial risk and return, then you're really not doing your fiduciary duty to the people whose money you are entrusted with working with.
True. That becomes a big challenge as an advisor, of which I'm not. I know people that are in that line of work at various different levels, and they're all for making sure that the money that is entrusted to them grows for their clients.
Yes, and so they decide their basics, their investment decisions on economic factors rather than social factors and what have you. And again, that's not our issue. I'm not going to get too far down that rat hole, other than to say that why do we have to have the tax code providing these kind of rules and regulations for how people manage their investments? That's crazy.
Yeah, it sure is.
All right, one more here. This will be HR 7744 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to allow, oh, look at this, another credit, an investment credit for certain domestic infant formula manufacturing products, and to allow a domestic production credit for certain infant formulas. Wow, you can't have a tax code without that, can you?
No formulas. Not a formula either. No, it's not what we're talking about.
Oh, mercy. That's insane. But okay, that's our Congress.gov segment for this week. Say what we do every week. We put the words Internal Revenue Code in quotes in the search bar at the top of the Congress.gov page so that you're searching on that entire 3-word string. And as of today, when we're recording this, that search brings back 1,535 hits. Of course, not all of those are efforts to change the tax code, but most of them are. And just about every one of them has a lobbyist behind it. You can bet on that. And so we need to get rid of the entire system, throw it out the window, as I say, yank it out by the roots, and replace it with the fair tax that doesn't have all this garbage in it.
There you go.
Okay. Now, you got the article I sent you last night.
I did. It's quite interesting. Even though it came out a few years ago, it's still relevant today. And what we're going to talk about now is from a website called Think Advisor. And this came out in 2021, and it's quite remarkable. It has 10 of the worst IRS problems that taxpayers face. And
we would note that all 10 of them go away under the fair tax.
So the company is called ALM, and ALM is an information and intelligence company that provides customers with critical news, data analysis, marketing solutions, and events to successfully manage their business. ThinkAdvisor.com is the website, and we go there to January 13th of 2022 for the article written by Melanie Waddell. Melanie Waddell came out, but the interesting thing about this is, as Bob just said, this 10 top 10 worst problems that we face from the Internal Revenue Service can all be solved by the fair tax.
Yep. Now let's get into the list. And at the top of the list, number one, processing and refund delays. During 2021, tens of millions of taxpayers were forced to wait extraordinarily long periods of time for the IRS to process their tax returns issue their refunds and address their correspondence. More than 75% of individual income tax return filings resulted in refunds. At the close of the 2021 filing season, the IRS had 35.3 million returns awaiting manual processing. Now, again, we touched on this a couple of weeks ago on FAIRtax Power Radio. A tax refund is your money. You are getting your change back. You have paid more tax than you owe. You are getting your change back. And that just means if your refund is being delayed like this for an extraordinarily long period of time, the government is just holding on to your money. You're not getting any interest on it. They take money from you, then they hold it from you and make you jump through hoops to get it back. Why do we have a tax system where that is even possible? That's insane.
And that's the thing, we get the money taken out of our paychecks. We don't get to take care of ourselves and our families first. We have to feed the government first. So the money, then we have to fight tooth and nail and send all this information about us to the Treasury through the Internal Revenue Service process, which of course is outlined in Publication 17. And,
your favorite reading material.
Tell you, it is immense. It's like a paper version of spaghetti, and the challenges are there, and we just sort of go along with it because we know that we're going to have a huge refund in April or thereabouts every year, and we think, what are we going to do with this money? And I say, what are you going to do? What could you have done with the money in the 12 months that you didn't have it?
Yeah, if they'd let you keep it. All right, let's move on. The second one, the IRS has something called a "Where's My Refund" tool. There are some issues with that, are there not, sir?
Yes, there are. Taxpayers attempted to check the status of their refunds on IRS.gov more than 632 million times last year, which was 2021. But Where's My Refund does not provide information on unprocessed returns. It does not explain any status delays, a reason for the delays, where returns stand in the processing pipeline, or what actions taxpayers need to take, if any.
Yeah, so you go ask it, "Where's my refund?" And the system says, "What refund? I don't know anything about that."
The system, what are you talking about? Who are you?
Oh, mercy. That does not happen with the fair tax. It just doesn't happen. And this number 3 one, telephone service was the worst it had ever been. Can you imagine trying to get through to the IRS on the phone?
Crazy.
Mission impossible. The combination of processing delays and questions about new programs caused call volumes to almost triple from prior years. This was a couple of years ago, 282 million phone calls to the IRS. And customer service representatives only answered about 32 million out of 200. Now, 32 million sounds like a big number, but when it's 32 out of 282, that's 11%. 11% of the call even got answered.
I'm still on from back then, even now. I've been waiting for hello. No, no, I'm sorry. You'll have to call back later. Yeah.
89. That means 89% of people don't even get their call doesn't connect.
No, they just sit there and how many hours does it take for you to go through that process? People live their own lives. They don't have time to camp out on the IRS, queue for a phone call to somebody who probably would not be able to answer the question anyway.
Yeah, they said the average hold time was about 23 minutes, though some have reported hold times much longer than that. And the frustration and dissatisfaction was high throughout the year with the low level of phone service. Guess what? The fair tax doesn't need any phone service. That problem goes away when you pay your taxes at the cash register instead of with a federal income tax return.
Exactly. The 10 IRS problems that taxpayers face is what we're going over.
Okay, number 4, go.
The IRS took months to process taxpayer responses. Tens of millions of notices were sent to taxpayers during 2021. These included nearly 14 million math error notices. automated underreporter notices, where an amount reported on a tax return did not match the corresponding amount reported to the IRS on a Form 1099 or other information reporting document, and notices requesting a taxpayer to authenticate his or her identity. In many cases, taxpayer responses were required, and if the IRS did not process a response, its automated processes could take adverse action or not release the refund claimed on the next tax return. The IRS received 6.2 million taxpayer responses to proposed adjustments and took an average of 199 days to process them, up from 74 days in fiscal year 2019, the most recent pre-pandemic year they have records for.
So we have got a system that is falling apart. The wheels are coming off the wagon. It's just insane. You asked Steve last week, why do the American people continue to tolerate a tax system like that? Why don't we just pay our taxes when we buy things at the cash register? End of story, no problem, game over. Number 5, staff shortages hurt service. The IRS's budget, they said it was reduced by nearly 20% in inflation-adjusted dollars from 2010 to 2021. So we're going back a couple of years, and of course there has been a tremendous uptick in IRS funding proposed by the current administration. But they're saying at this time they had lost over 33,000 full-time employees. So the IRS is understaffed, overworked, takes forever to answer, doesn't answer the phone in 89% of the cases, takes half a year or longer to process your return. And they just how many people would actually like to work for the IRS? I'm not sure I would. But
No, I'm all against that. And you think about that because they're just people, it's they have a misguided boss, there in Washington, D.C., but maybe some people like to be, the bully.
Well, I imagine there may be some too that like the idea of having access to other people's confidential information so they can leak it if it, helps their political agenda. We talked about that last week. But anyway, again, all of these problems go away with the fair tax. Every last one of them.
So we're up to number 6.
Up to number 6, go.
Lack of transparency led to confused taxpayers. The IRS is not consistently transparent and does not provide clear and timely information about what taxpayers need to know, what they need to know. They're not clear about it, leaving many people confused and frustrated. For example, taxpayers could not access the status details of IRS operations, such as a filing season backlog, delayed refunds, returns pulled for inconsistencies, or amended return processing delays. Further, taxpayers are confused by unclear notices and IRS guidance, and they don't always understand the IRS's reasons for its decisions, as a rationale is not always provided.
Yeah, the rationale is I'm the IRS and I can do what I want to, pay up.
Yeah, and hopefully you're just going to not do anything and sign a check or pay online or whatever. It's just these are 10 of the worst IRS problems that we as taxpayers face that all go away with the fair tax. It's a tax on.
Yes, again, we've discussed this with Steve Hayes. Again, a retired tax attorney, or he says a recovering tax attorney. And he says he would, if one of his clients got one of these notices from the IRS saying, you owe X number of dollars. Well, I really don't, but they're demanding payment that is not owed to them. Steve says his advice and his colleagues' advice would be just pay it. It will cost less to pay it than it will to fight it. So the IRS can just demand whatever it wants from anybody they want for any reason they want. And they will get what they want because it costs more to fight it and prove the IRS wrong than it would to just pay it. And tax attorneys like Steve Hayes have said they would advise their clients just pay it and don't mess with it.
Yeah, and keep going down the road.
Yes, and that again goes away with the fair tax. Filing season delays is number seven. The 2021 filing season can be described as the perfect storm. Now, of course, this was back during the pandemic, so that may be have a little effect on it. But it was one of the most challenging filing seasons experienced by tens of millions of taxpayers. The pandemic highlighted serious problems with the IRS's reliance on antiquated systems and processes, such as having to manually process millions of tax returns, which stymied tax administration, produced historically low levels of service. In May of 2021, the proposed postponed filing season due date, over 35 million returns are still awaiting manual processing because, as you like to point out to them, they are still using DOS 1.0.
Exactly. They got an upgrade, so they can go from a 50 meg hard drive up to a 75 meg hard drive.
Oh, mercy. Well, I tell you what, that again, that's part of what this increased IRS funding that the current administration wants to do is to direct some of it to enforcement activities, but direct some of it to updating their technology, which means it'll just be easier for them to invade your privacy and possibly leak it to somebody. It's crazy that we have an IRS. There is not, I cannot name one good thing about the IRS, a good thing that the IRS does. There is only one way, and you hear politicians all the time say, "Oh, I want to get rid of the IRS," but it stops there.
Right.
Those same politicians that want to get rid of let's introduce a flat tax. That'll get rid of the IRS. No, it won't. You still have to send a tax return to somebody, and guess who that somebody is? The IRS. The only way you're going to get rid of the IRS is to get rid of the income tax, and the way you're going to get rid of the income tax is to replace it with the fair tax, and then all of these problems that we're talking about that this article at thinkadvisor.com highlighted go away. I mean, they just vanish into thin air. They're not mitigated. They're not better. They're gone. Absolutely gone when you replace the income tax with a fair tax. That's just, why don't we do this? It drives me nuts as to why we haven't done, as a nation, we haven't done this yet.
We're not hurting enough yet, and I think this sustained inflation has a lot to do with propelling the fair tax forward. In conversations, people are open to how can I get out of this? I'm spending, for a loaf of bread, price has gone up, steak, eggs, everything, through the roof. And, some people argue that it's due to corporations are greedy, but a lot of it has to do with, especially back in 2021, with building supply chain issues and the fact that it was hard to get products to and from the field from the farm to the table. Way of issues that were around a few years ago.
Okay, we got about 5 minutes left and 3 points to get to. So let's hit number 8.
Number 8 is e-filing barriers. During the 2021 filing season, about 91% of individual returns and about 69% of business returns were e-filed through October 23rd of 2021. While e-filing significantly benefits both taxpayers and the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS still receives a significant number of paper-filed returns. Paper returns require manual processing, which leads to processing delays and potential transcription errors. In contrast, e-filing significantly benefits taxpayers due to reduced transcription errors and quicker return processing and refund turnaround times. Imagine if you had your refund money every month and not being accumulated in some catalog over at the Internal Revenue Service. What would you do with that money? Look at your stub while we're finishing up the program here. Look at your pay stub and calculate over the year what's being taken out that you don't have access to, that you're just clamoring so hard to get back in April of every year. What would you do? What could you do with that money? Now,
yes, I would love to have a tax refund every month. Guaranteed. Not everybody gets a tax refund. So about 75% people do. But there are some people that don't get a tax refund from the IRS. They end up owing money on April 15th.
Right.
And but with a fair tax, you are guaranteed to get a tax refund, and you will get it every month, not once a year, maybe. Let's move on. Number 9, digital communications need to be expanded, is what they say. Not enough digital communication is available to the IRS. Said during the pandemic, the IRS made it easier for some taxpayers to securely sign and submit documents electronically, receive answers to their questions through text, chat, and other stuff like that. But they're saying the IRS and taxpayers would both benefit from prioritizing and expanding those tools at a more rapid pace. And even though, again, this article is a couple of years old, that we've not seen significant movement in that area yet with the IRS. So again, why do we have an IRS? Let's get rid of it.
Still using dial-up over there, with the computers that they have. They can't get high speed connected to them. It has to be the plain old telephone service hooked up to the wall.
Okay, so we've got about 2 minutes left. Hit number 10.
Taxpayers who can't pay face hurdles in getting relief. Many taxpayers have difficulty paying their taxes, their liabilities. The IRS offers collection alternatives for financially struggling taxpayers, but the alternatives are underutilized. Some taxpayers seeking installment agreements do not receive the relief from user fees Congress intended because IRS procedures for identifying low-income taxpayers are fraudulent or flawed. Requests for offers and compromise have declined in 7 of the 8 past years. The Internal Revenue Service continues to issue automated collection notices despite backlogs in processing taxpayer correspondence and amended returns, and some taxpayers are surprised to learn they cannot dispute the merits of their underlying liabilities at a collection due process hearing because IRS collection notices did not adequately explain their rights.
I'll ask you the same question. Why do we put up with a system like this? I guess people don't understand that they don't have to. There is an alternative. Lead on your representative. Get them to support H.R. 25. Again, the House is supposed to be voting on it sometime. We're supposed to have voted on it last year. They didn't do it yet. But we have just simply got to tell our congressional representatives, we've had enough of the IRS. We've had enough of all these problems that come with having an IRS. We need to get rid of the IRS. We need to replace it with the fair tax. And that's just the long and short of it. And that is all the time we have for this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. That was fun. Again, that was a thinkadvisor.com article from a couple of years ago, but it was still quite illustrative of the problems that the IRS still continues to have, will continue to have, for as long as the IRS continues to exist. So let's put them out of their misery and replace the income tax with a fair tax. All right. Again, thank you for watching and listening. Thank you for sharing the videos of FAIRtax Power Radio. We will see you back here next week. Same time, same channel on the FAIRtax official Facebook page or the FAIRtax Guys YouTube channel. So until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
Bob Scarborough.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you will demand it.
So tell me how it works.
It's probably changed since the last time I saw it, but the short answer would be, you want to take this one?
Oh, sure. Okay. Imagine bringing home everything you make. You don't get taxed for saving or accumulating wealth, and your boss doesn't get taxed more even if he pays you more.
Wow, see, that's amazing.
So the end result of all that is the cost of producing products and running a business goes down, so things cost less. And on top of all that, imagine every criminal, non-citizen, and under-the-table worker also paying taxes.
That's amazing.
That's the fair tax.